I am joined today by a friend of the show. He has been with me from the very beginning, going back to 2021, and I'm just elated to have him back. He is my friend, Middleweight Contender, Lydell, never fold, Poag. Lydell, it's a pleasure to see your face, my friend. What a treat this is. And welcome back to the Mom's Basement MMA Empire.
Hey man, it's the empire now, right, man? The last time I was on this show, it was a basement, bro. But you moved up to the top floor in the sky, man, apartment building in the sky. So
Mom, it's gonna, I
congrats
don't
to you.
know, like Mom's penthouse, maybe. It's coming.
Hey, has a ring to it, right?
It's
Not the
coming.
same, but it has a ring.
Lydell, the most important question of this interview: Team Zuck or Team Elon? What do we got going on with this? Two
Ooh,
billionaires in a cage fight. Like, tell me, like, if you
ooh.
had to train
You
one
know
of
what?
these guys, who are you training and why?
You know what? I feel like the obvious answer is Mark. Yeah, it's Mark. He's already trained BJJ. You know what I mean? I just seen a video of him choking somebody out. I seen a video of him getting choked out. You know what I mean? So he knows what it's like on both sides. So I trained Zuck. Elon, I think he's more one of those talkers. You know what I mean? He has little guy syndrome to a certain extent. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
here's my toys. This is real life.
I think like the idea of like two billionaires potentially fighting like on a UFC entry level contract, like
Man,
that makes me laugh.
dog, like they should just fund the entire event. You know what I mean? They're just there for fun. Or either that or do it in front of two billionaires in Abu Dhabi, man,
Hey, the way I see, I look at this and there's a part of me like I smile and I think it's cool. Like I like kind of freak fights sometimes I do. But then I
Yeah,
also
yeah.
the hard ass in me is like, what the fuck we got going on here? Like we have other contenders. We got real shit to talk about. Like this is crazy. And I kind of want to get your opinion
Yeah.
right now. Like these kind of like freak show fights and the UFC entertaining freak show fights, is that good for the sport or does it kind of like maybe take away opportunities from other people? Like, I'd love to get your opinion. Are these super fights a good thing for the sport or maybe a not so good thing for the sport?
I honestly am one of those people who like 110% don't have a problem with like super fights with like celebrity influencers fights or like fitness influencers and like these people fighting. I think it's 100% it's great for the sport, you know what I mean? To a certain extent, when Brock Lesnar did fight, like he finally made that crossover. People associate him so heavily with WWE that we just have casual fans now. You know what I mean? So realistically, guys, Shane Carwin or who was I forgot who the first was Randy Couture the first person that Brock Lesnar fought? He
Uh,
fought for the title right away, right?
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So like people probably didn't even know who Randy Couture was. You know what I mean? Like,
Which is,
but fighting Brock Lesnar brought that whole new audience. So I
yeah.
don't have a problem with it. And plus, you have guys who really want to like make a name. Like guys like Jake Paul. I'm pretty sure he signed like a PFL deal already, right?
Yeah.
So he's going to fight MMA. You know what I mean? It's going to bring eyes to the sport. Yeah, I feel like all that press is good press regardless. And we need it. Fighters need it.
The way I look at it is I think there's a interesting way to do it. But for me, it's like you have to like do something pretty significant if you're going to like have a fight like this. So for me, in my
Yeah.
opinion, I, I would think of it as a philanthropist, right? So for example, it's like, okay, UFC in Africa, what are we doing there? It's like all the
Mm,
proceeds we're going to get to this fight, we're going to build a performance institute in Ghana or South Africa. And like, we're going to do something, we're going to use all the attention, all the cash to do something positive to develop this sport in an underdeveloped part of the world. And that's
yeah.
something that I think about right off the bat. I'm like, could this freak show fight potentially make something like that a possibility? And if we can do something like that, then I'm a little bit more on board, I think.
See, I like if it's something like I don't know, like Hasbullah and
Mm-hmm.
some other little guy fighting, I feel weird about that. Or like they have dudes with no bottom halves or whatever fighting.
Yeah.
I feel weird about that. But when it's like influencers, you know what I mean? Like guys, able-bodied people who actually bring like looks to the sport, I'm like,
I
more for
would
me, really.
I would say this though. I would like it to be an exhibition bout with pads. We're not trying to see anyone get freaking killed.
Ah,
I
you're
think
absolutely right. That's the way it should be.
yep, that's the
That's
way
the way
it
it should
should be. Let's have some respect for the sport because not everyone can do what you guys do. And I wanted to shift to Lydell and talk a little more briefly about MMA as a whole. There's
Mm,
a interesting story going on about the status of Bellator MMA.
mm,
A possibility that they may get acquired by a different promotion, but who's to say what's going to happen? I don't think any
yeah.
of us really know at this point. But if Bellator MMA is to go away potentially, does that create more opportunities for fighters like you, or is that a negative thing? I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
You see, I'd like to think that because like if a larger conglomerate, let's say PFL, because what I've been hearing is that it would likely be PFL. So
Mhm.
if they combine rosters, I kind of look at it kind of as like the UFC acquiring the WEC
Mhm.
or acquiring Strikeforce, where there's more matchups, you know what I mean? Different guys get to see each other who probably wouldn't have been able to see each other. But the only thing that kind of like puts me on a fence about it is the fact that the UFC still has the reputation they have. You know what I mean? They still carry most of the weight. So realistically, even if there are more matchups, there are more fighters, it's a just as big organization. They don't have just as big as the marketing push, and you know what I mean? Kind of like things like that. So
Is there a
I do
possibility
think it's good for the sport, though. I think it's good.
Is there a possibility though that we could also see some of these guys that have built names and followings in Bellator return to regional MMA and you push out? Now all of a sudden the cards just got a lot bigger because think
Ooh,
about some of the people on Bellator that are really good that may not make it to the UFC. Like
yeah,
Christian Edwards is a great example of that. The UFC may not
great
pick him up,
example.
but he could potentially. He's like a big name guy. A lot of people want to see him
Yeah.
fight. Like think about like people like him returning to the regional scene and maybe getting paid the same as a Bellator fighter, like there's really no loss for him.
Yeah, man. So if he's getting paid like a Bellator fighter, you know what I mean? Or hypothetically, myself, that would be dope, man.
You
Maybe it
see
means,
Christian
you know what I mean?
Edwards compete for a middleweight title in CFFC. You never know,
Yeah, imagine that. Yeah, I mean, I hope not. I hope so, because that's my guy, you know what I mean, bro?
right?
But middleweight, I got that locked down. Like heavyweight, he's all good. It'd be dope, man, to start realistically these regional scenes earlier, because I know LFA does to a certain extent, you know what I mean? To start really preparing these fighters to be big name fighters, you know what I mean? Like giving them the full treatment, like like a kind of like a code, you know what I mean? Like a certain code we follow by every single regional promotion. Honestly, it's the way it should be.
And for some reason, I called Christian an 85er, and he's way too fucking big.
Yeah,
he's
I just seen that dude. Look, I just wrestled with that dude the other day before I cut 15 pounds, man. It's a big boy.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
245 right now at the very least.
Yeah,
So
he's a very athletically gifted person. I've talked to two of his former opponents. I've talked to Ben Parrish, and I had Rakim Cleveland
yeah.
on my show not that long ago, and they both said the same thing. They're like, that guy is an athletic freak.
Yeah,
Like,
he really is.
and he's dangerous. And and so they were basically both saying, like, give me more credit for that win because that guy's scary to fight. And I'm like, hey,
And more importantly, though, you know what I mean? That guy, he's been training since he was 17. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Training at the highest level since he was 17. He's like 25,
yeah,
24. He's younger than me,
yeah.
which is insane. You know what I mean? With like two times more experience.
Yeah, like think about like
Real
the
dope.
great stage that he's competed on for the length of time and yeah, considering his age, that's absolutely crazy. Well, Lydell, let's shift. Let's talk a little bit more about you specifically. LFA 139 is going on a year since that fight happened against Dylan Budka, and you've kind of been laying low for a little bit, at least publicly, anyway, at
Yeah.
least publicly. So before we talk into like what you've been up to post fight, let's like revisit this fight. LFA 139 against Dylan Budka. I got the sense that I don't know, there may have been some friction between you two. I think that's putting it fairly.
Huh.
A little
You
bit of
think so?
friction, just a skosh of friction between you two. What do you recall? What do you remember from that fight going, 11 months ago?
In the simplest way, I remember. I don't know. I think I think his kind of I don't know personality switch or like whatever went off. It just kind of it rubbed me the wrong way, but I didn't allow myself to acknowledge that it rubbed me the wrong way.
Mhm.
You know, So honestly, I think it was really just a like a mindset thing, you know, like he's a guy who had a setback in his career, and he reinvented himself and made himself like mentally invincible to a certain extent. Like whatever I need to do to be at that level to always be ready to perform, I'll be ready to perform, which I admire. You know what I mean? I kind of look forward to that a little bit. And he's 11 months since I fought him. You know what I mean? And him still doing stuff. So that, and then also he's a dick, bro. You know what I mean? He's a dick.
Hmm.
Cool. He's a good fighter. You know what I mean? But that dude's a dick, man. You know, I'm always wishing the best and like things like that. You know, for guys I cross paths with, because I'm just as big a fan as I am a fighter. You know, so honestly, the stages were bright, but I feel like that's where I belong. You know,
Yeah.
like I've never felt better physically. Uh, mentally is the only thing. You know, I feel like I was a little too set in. I'm a complete mixed martial artist. You know what I mean? I'm going to show that off this time. And then him pulling up with the energy he pulled up with, like those two combined just made for a pretty like off the wall kind of like range of emotions for me. So
I think that's fair. And you look at it like Dylan, I think he's a very gifted fighter. He's had a
yeah,
lot of success, and I am of the opinion that he's probably going to be a champion for a regional promotion somewhere. He's a very
yeah,
good
somewhere.
guy. I think he's probably going to be in the show in a relatively short amount of time. But for you, when you go back and like actually zoom into the fight itself, he had a pretty straightforward game plan. Like number one, like he wasn't going to like stand and trade with you. He was acutely aware of your striking dangers that you possessed,
Dude.
and he fought smart. I thought I looked
Yeah,
at it and I'm like, dude, I would do that too. So
yeah.
when you look back at that fight, Lydell, like what are some of the things that you see about your performance that you liked, and what were some of the things that you saw that you didn't like?
The only thing that I like about that performance, honestly, is the fact that I felt like in the third round, I felt completely fine. Because I don't like prior to that fight, I had never been outside the second round, even in an amateur fight, you know what I mean? So a lot of his talk was oh, you know, I'm gonna drown him or whatever. And the same way I didn't like to acknowledge that him saying whatever he said to me, you know what I mean, bothered me. That kind of bothered me because hey, I'm training at altitude, but you've actually never been through like 3 rounds. You know what I mean? Like, what is that like? I'm about to be on the biggest stage. Like, what'll happen if I get to the second round and I don't? You know, so a little bit of that was in my head. It's a little bit of like things like that. So realistically, that night I found out my cardio is exactly where it needed to be. You know, as I knew it was. You know, so just trust. And the things I don't like the most, man, I just was so passive. Like my mindset was so stuck on counter everything that I just started playing a waiting game. And I've never been the one to play the waiting game. If I'm not mistaken, he actually went out there and threw the first leg kick on me. And I've always been the first person to get the fight started right away. As soon as the bell rings, I'm punching. You know what I mean? So I feel like more than anything, he psyched me out, and I didn't want to acknowledge that. You know what I mean? But really, realistically, I should have been acknowledging that. Like, hey, this is different. I've never experienced this before, and that's okay. You
It is,
know?
yeah, and that's part of like the process. It's part of the that's
Yeah.
part of, like the growing pains of this sport. Like you've always been like the guy that has
Yeah.
never really been tested before, and that was a test. And what have you been up to in the 11 months since? Like, take me back. Like after that fight, did you go back to Wink? Did you go to Richmond? What were you up to after that fight?
Uh, immediately after the fight, I think I want to say I went, I came back, I came back to the gym. Obviously, I trained a little bit, you know, talked and conferred, like counseled with my coaches, my training partners and things. And then I went home probably a couple months after, you know. I not too ashamed to say this, but I faced a little bit of a like a depressive spell after the fight, you know what I mean? Because realistically, when all you've ever done is win, you know what I mean? And I've lost in life and I've lost a lot. I've always lost in life, you know what I mean? But the ring was the one thing that I had never lost at, you know what I mean? And like a personal one-on-one fight, me and this guy. So it was a little weird for me. I had to kind of like reset, recalibrate, you know. So I went back home, trained a little bit, and then I came back immediately, and honestly got right back to the grind. Got right back to the grind. I I started working a job, dude. I started serving a little bit after that. You know what I mean?
All right.
Opened my repertoire up, and yeah, man. Besides just like the working, getting back into training, I've been a little bit into like the sports psychology now. So there's that. You know,
I think
there's a lot of little tweaks I've made. You know.
I think that's critically important. And as far as the 11 months, like, was that intentional to not fight for a period of time, or is that just the way it worked out?
No, man. Honestly, just like before Dylan Budka, it had maybe been a year.
Mm-hmm.
Dudes don't want to fight me. So props to Keith Dowell. You know what I mean? Um, I probably had at the very least, at the very least, 2 to 3 fights fall out in this 11 months.
Wow.
It'll be by the time I fight Keith Dowell in about like less than 2 weeks. But
Can you talk
yeah, dude.
about the fights that have fallen off?
Not really. My manager advises me. They don't really matter, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But one of those, well, I guess I can't really call it because they didn't really offer anybody. But we were looking into APFC as one to get a fight or whatever. That didn't materialize. So another LFA fight.
At what point does CFFC contact you, and at what point are you notified that Keith Dowell was your prospective opponent?
This was like maybe a week or two before my birthday. So I was super excited about it because the entire time I'm thinking I'm going to fight before my birthday, or
Mm-hmm.
I'll fight multiple times before my birthday just for the fights to fall out. So those fell out, and my guy Rod Galvin over at CFFC, he got in touch with me directly. When usually he gets in touch with my manager, he was just like, "Hey, dude, I noticed you haven't fought in a while, man. Do you have anything lined up?" And I was like, "No, man, we've just been having fights fall out because they were in contact with me, but whenever they would get in contact with me, I had something planned with LFA we were trying to work out, or something planned with whoever we were trying to work out." So yeah, he hit me up, and it just so happened that I was right in between, like coming off of like I'm actually not going to fight. So he hit my manager up directly afterwards, man, and we got it popping, man. He said he already had a guy in mind, man. So I was like, okay, cool. This is almost for sure, you know. And from that point on, I just knew to be ready to jump right back into camp because realistically, like I maybe had started like 2 or 3 camps because whenever I'm notified there may be a fight, you know, I'm already in camp, you know what I mean? But being notified there may be a fight, you kind of
Got
notch it up a
it.
little bit. You kind of keep up with the consistency, you know? So because those fights fell out, I kind of took a little time in between those two. And just his notification kind of gave me that fire to just jump right back on the bandwagon, you know what I mean?
Keith Dowell, I look at this guy, and I looked in his Tapology. I tried to go on the interwebs there and see what we could find out about this guy. Dangerous. Jiu-jitsu, a lot of submission victories under his belt, and he has
Yeah.
got with his fists as well. A lot
Mm.
of experience as an amateur fighter. You look at this guy. What are your opinions on Keith Dowell from the brief amount of like homework that you've done on him?
Well, yeah, it's exactly that. It's kind of brief. He has some really good wins I've looked through, and he's really conditioned. He's conditioned really well. So I'm conditioned really well. You know what I mean? Always been conditioned really well. Even though that last fight, you know, I kind of didn't know whether or not I was conditioned really well. I'm conditioned really well. So I think this is a fight that could go 3 rounds, or I think this is a fight that could really just could be over just as soon as it starts. You know what I mean? Like I'm ready to live in that moment, and it's a good thing because this is kind of a guy who he also lives in that moment. You know what I mean? Like he goes for it. He does have like that that savvy when it comes to the grappling. You know what I mean? And things like that, like things you don't just acquire. You know what I mean? Those are things like that are learned over time. So I respect him. I respect him to the utmost, man. But dude, the way I'm coming, you know what I mean? Like my mindset right now. Shout out to Keith Dowell. Shout
Hey, shout out to Keith Dowell. I think
out to
he's a
him.
tough guy. Now let's look at this from his side of the fence. So Keith Dowell, smart guy. He's going to go on
Hmm.
Fight Pass. He's going to look at that Dylan Budka fight. And now I'm thinking about all my grappling. Now I'm thinking about all these subs I've done. I'm like, I like this fight. I like this fight a lot. Those
Yeah.
are the types of things that he's thinking without giving anything away about your game plan. Why is it if somebody tries to grapple fuck you, why is that not going to work now?
I know the simplest way I can put this is the same way I said earlier. And once again, I really don't like to make excuses. So just hear myself say it, you know what I mean? Even when things are the way they are, it sounds kind of fucked up. But my mindset really wasn't where it should be.
Mm-hmm.
My mindset wasn't counter wrestling, you know what I mean? Dylan Budka, tough dude. He had better wrestling credentials than I do, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Keith Dowell, he's a good wrestler. I'm just as good a wrestler as he is, if not better. You know what I mean? Jiu-jitsu, I do jiu-jitsu the same way he does jiu-jitsu, if not better. You know what I mean? So realistically, wherever he wants to fight, the fight's there. But when it comes to these, you know what I mean? I'm dangerous in every situation. So realistically, if you were smart, you'd go watch that Fight Pass fight and you try to replicate Dylan Bucke's game plan. But I don't know, it might not work out so well for the next guy who tries it, you know?
When I think of you, Lydell, I think of a dynamic athlete right away. Like I look at the guy,
Mhm.
I'm like,
Thank
okay,
you, brother. Thank you.
that's the guy that is stronger than everybody, that's faster than everybody. Like you were probably like that guy growing up, where it's like
Yeah.
any sport, any activity, it's like no, Lydell on my team, right? Like you are like that guy. And you've found a lot of success in mixed martial arts going back to your amateur career. Like you took to it right away. Like these guys, you're cracking these guys like eggs, like right away. And when you think about like that first patch of adversity, it's the first guy that didn't crack. And now you like sit and you've been thinking about it for like 11 months. Like, what is it that you want to remind everybody, like before you get ready to make the swag for CFFC 121? Do you think that some people may have forgotten all that stuff I just mentioned? That some people may have forgotten what you accomplished in your amateur career, that you were an undefeated professional fighter before you fought Dylan? Like, do you think people may have forgotten some of the things that you've already accomplished in MMA?
Yeah, I actually do, man. I actually do. I think the only people who haven't forgotten is the people back home. I go back home, and for some reason, they think I'm the biggest star. They're like, "Oh man, you know, you're the UFC fighter and whatnot, man." So that's always great. But honestly, on the MMA tip, man, I think people have forgotten, dude. It's been a rough while. Like after that fight, I had people hitting me up, you know what I mean, saying my wrestling zero and doing the Khabib voice, you know what I mean? And yeah, I had a lot of people with a lot of different opinions, man, just coming in from everywhere, you know, because realistically, MMA is a game where you have to be as perfect as possible. You know what I mean? And realistically, I guess it's being as perfect as possible for as long as possible. Because you really want to be undefeated for as long as possible. But really, I think this was one of those situations where even though people forgot, I'm glad it happened to me early, you know what I mean? So I could have checked myself at the door and know what I need to do, those adjustments I still need to make, you know? So really, it's okay that people forgot because I'm I've never been a guy who's not okay with reminding people. You know what I mean?
You fought for CFFC twice before. This will be the third time that you are going to be
Third time.
re-entering the CFFC cage. And for you to like fight for this promotion on UFC Fight Pass at the
Mhm.
casino there in Tunica, like this is a big fight. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be showing up. For Dowell's side, he's like a local guy. I'm expecting there
Yeah.
a ton of people that are showing up to support him. Like you're the blue corner for this. Like you're this fight isn't in Virginia. Like nobody probably wants to see you win. Is that like does that energize you even more knowing that you're fighting in this kid's backyard and his people are going to be there in full force, or do you not even care?
Yeah, honestly, I'm undefeated in other people's backyard, man. I'm an odd beater first and foremost. You know what I mean? I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be doing what I'm doing right now. You know what I mean? Let alone alive. So it ain't nothing for me to go in there and beat some more odds. You know what I mean? Astronomical is possible to me. Saying astronomical means to me that there's a slight chance, there's possible. You know what I mean? But realistically, he's a tough dude, but I'm a tough dude too. And I think this is a step up for him. You know what I mean? It's a good fight for me for sure. Tough dude for sure. He's conditioned for sure. But I'm a tough dude every single day of the week, every area, every aspect. So you know.
For people who have never seen you fight before and they're getting ready and I've talked you up a little bit. There are other people that don't know about you too much. I'm like, yo, bro, like I'm telling you, this guy, he's a special fighter. Just tune in and watch and you'll see.
Hmm.
Like for people who have never seen you fight, give me a preview. Like what do you think, what can they expect when they see you out there here in a couple of weeks?
Expect expect to see me take off as soon as the bell goes. As soon as the bell goes, it's just the way I am. That's no secret. You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
fight bell to bell. So as soon as that bell rings, I'm fighting. As soon as the bell rings again, I'm stopping. You know what I mean? That's
And
really it.
And one final question, Lydell, it's simply this, like without giving me too much detailed information here, what do you need to do to get this win?
Mm, I just need to go in there and be myself. I don't need to think at all. Just like the last fight, I just needed to go in there and not think because realistically, there's nothing Dylan Budka, there's nothing Keith Dowell, there's nothing any of these guys can do to me that I haven't seen in the gym already, situations I haven't been put in, you know what I mean? I'm battle tested, even though my record doesn't show it yet, you know. These guys that I do put this work in with this time that I have been in here has battle scarred me and made me test it. So I'm ready to go out there and test my metal the same way they are, you know what I mean? Same way he is. So
CFFC 121, that happens later on this month in July at Tunica. You are not going to want to miss it. Lydell, as always,
please,
give you the final word, my friend. If there's anyone out there that you'd like to thank, let's knock that out before we go.
hey, I just want to thank my coaches, thank my sparring partners. And it's a month of July right now, but I had a whole bunch of family birthdays in June. So I want to just thank my family. Without you guys, I wouldn't be here. Without you guys, I wouldn't get to do what I love. Lastly, my baby girl Nida, love her the most, man. She holds me down. She's my rock. So CFFC, turn in.
Well, Richmond, VA, don't forget to watch your boy fight later in July. He's going to put on a show for you guys. Lydell,
Absolutely.
I appreciate your time. I hope we can chop it up again very soon when we're getting ready to talk about another one of your fights.
Yeah.
I hope it's not 11 months from now.
It won't be 11 months for sure. For sure, it won't be 11 months this time, man.